Welcome to the Veil Between Lives, a sanctuary where lived experience meets the great mystery. Here we hold soulful conversations for those who have touched the unseen and what lies beyond the physical world. We're honored you're here stepping into this space with us. I'm Susan, joined by my co-host Em, and a very special warm welcome to parapsychologist and paranormal authority Lloyd Auerbach, who has a master in science and over 45 years in the field. He's an author and co-author of 9 nonfiction books and 2 paranormal mystery novels. He teaches parapsychology for the Rhine Education Center and Atlantic University, is the president of the Forever Family Foundation, the president of the board of the Rhine Research Center. In his guise as Professor Paranormal, he's also a performing psychic entertainer. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you here today. Yeah, really honored and really excited to bring some science into this conversation as well. Yeah. So I'm wondering if we can maybe start a little bit about you and how you got into parapsychology in the first place.
Well, I mean, for me, it really goes back to when I was a kid and reading a lot of science fiction, comic books, and watching TV shows, even preschool, things like The Twilight Zone, One Step Beyond, a show called Topper, just all that stuff. But as I grew up, I really was a science geeky kid. Um, and I also was very heavily into the media, partly because my dad worked for NBC. So, I'm a TV baby in that respect. The TV show Dark Shadows, which was a supernatural folk, soap opera in the 60s. That's the first place I heard the term parapsychology, though I had read it in a Superman comic before that. So once I saw that on Dark Shadows, and I was already reading kind of folklore books, knowing that they were folklore about vampires and werewolves. And for good or for bad, the Dewey Decimal System, books on the science of parapsychology are in the same section as folklore on witchcraft and the occult and vampires and werewolves and things like that. So I discovered the science books written by J.B. Rhine and others in the field and kind of ate them up. I had a couple teachers in high school who were also interested in the subject, both science teachers, one physics, one earth science, and they helped sponsor a parapsychology club that we had in my high school in Elmsford, New York. Didn't do ghost hunting. We focused mainly on doing experiments with ESP and psychokinesis, but I did also have an interest in the ghostly stuff, and was fortunate that through a neighbor I got to meet and spend a little bit of time with Montague Ullman, who had done the leading research on dream telepathy, and one of his colleagues who also lived very close to me, Gertrude Schmeidler, who eventually became my boss for a little while when I first got into the field. And also got to meet Hans Holzer and a few other folks through other means during my high school years. So the universe conspired, let's put it that way.
Oh, yes.
And it kept going in college at Northwestern. I studied cultural anthropology, and there were a lot of courses on the anthropology of magic and religion, which of course dovetailed into psychic ability and other things. And then timing wise, there was a master's program at John F. Kennedy University here in California. Was able to kind of get into that.
Wow. So you really have many, many years in this. I love it.
I don't even count the high school stuff or anything like that. It's really, I kind of count my start from the first semester in grad school in parapsychology.
Yeah, but how incredible is that the science teachers that supported this club and you creating this club? That's amazing. Those are the people that make a difference.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty popular club too we had a fairly small junior, senior high school, but we had a lot of people who were interested in the subject.
Yeah. I definitely would have been one in that club.
Same. Love it.
It could possibly have even helped to explain some of the things that were happening in my life.
There were some of the students who would talk, who wanted to talk about some of their experiences. And fortunately, because I got a chance to talk to some others in the field, to some of the kind of luminaries in the field at that point, and also point people in the right direction, I and other people in the club were able to kind of point people in those directions. And actually, the physics teacher, who was one of the sponsors, had several unusual experiences growing up as well. So
Oh,
we talked a lot about that. That's kind of how we started the ball rolling.
oh, that's great. So I'm wondering now if we can dive into the conversation with topics that are related to the survival of consciousness after bodily death. For example, out of body experiences, near death experiences, and reincarnation.
So we in parapsychology we have three major areas or buckets that we are involved with. One is extrasensory perception or non-sensory perception. It's really not a sixth sense at all. It's about perception and it's about consciousness getting information without the use of the physical senses at all. And then we also look at psychokinesis, mind over matter. Again, that's consciousness directly interacting with things in the physical world without, hands, tools, things like that. Um, Survival of bodily death in some respects, is what kicked off the field in 1882 officially with the founding of the Society for Psychical Research in Great Britain, which still exists and is very active today, because there was a huge movement in spiritualism that happened in the second half of the 19th century. So
Mm.
there were scientists from pretty much every discipline. Uh, some of the disciplines were just getting started, like psychology at that time,
Mm.
that were heavily interested in not just spiritualism, but also in psychic abilities that people's experiences that were happening. But what we've learned over the years is that things like out of body experiences and near death experiences and reincarnation, those don't exist in a vacuum from extrasensory perception and psychokinesis. So out of body experiences is people can feel like they're out of body, and very often we feel detached. That doesn't count. You have to be perceiving the world in some way, shape, or form at a point outside your body. So a common one would be people in a dream or waking up from sleep, suddenly find themselves on the ceiling, facing down, looking down on their body, and they freak out and slam back in. That separate perception is what's really important, not just the sensation that you're out of your body. It's getting in the information. And you're doing that with ESP. I mean, you don't have a physical eye or eyes to see anything, so it is non-sensory perception. So that's really involved there.
Right.
Out-of-body experiences have been studied in the laboratory. There have been several people who were able to or are able to kind of leave their body at will under controlled conditions. And there are different types of experimental setups that have been done for that.
Oh.
Some of them travel quite a bit. Probably one of the most famous, who also is very famous in the remote viewing world, was Ingo Swann,
Mhm.
who not only could do out of body, he later on started teaching the remote viewing process, which does not involve out of body experience. It involves getting information instead of going to a place. But he
Mhm.
wrote a book in 75 that where he decided to go past the Earth, and he went to Jupiter and Saturn, and he described features of Jupiter and Saturn that astronomers are saying, yeah, no, that's not right. Until Voyager got there. And once
Yeah.
Voyager got to those planets, what he picked up on was confirmed.
Wow.
So people can travel quite a bit. Out of body experiences are one of the possible constituents of a near death experience. Uh, when people are, their heart stops or there's lowered brain activity and a combination with the heart stopping, breathing, respiration is next to nil. It has to be near death, not just, you know, in some other state.
Mm.
And many people report having an out of body experience, the ones who have a near death experience, because there are a huge number of people who are near death but have no recollection of such experiences at all.
Oh.
Some of them will go out of their body if they're on the operating table and then be able to describe later on watching the operation. And even sometimes there are some really good cases where the individual floated around the hospital and saw and heard things that were not possibly within their earshot. There's some really good instances of this, but not everybody has the out of body experience.
Mm.
Classic near death experience. You go through a tunnel. Some people go out of body, or they don't feel like they're in their body anymore, and the next thing they're doing is going through a dark tunnel towards a light. That's where the whole go towards the light thing comes from.
Mhm. Yeah.
And At the other end, there are any number of experiences people have with entities, some of whom might be religious, relating to their own religion, mind
Mhm.
you. Might be a voice or a light that speaks to them. It could be, there's any number of different types of things. Some people have seen a city of light or seen other things. They have often a recollection of gaining extra knowledge, but it's kind of gone when they come back, which is frustrating to
Mhm.
people. But
Mhm.
possibly the most important thing about the near-death experience, or genuine one, is that people are changed. There are sometimes significant personality shifts. There's certainly less of a fear of death. That's right off the bat. They're not afraid of that anymore. But sometimes people end up with psychic abilities or intense psychic experiences afterwards. Sometimes they change. They have a whole different outlook on life, and that's caused even breakups and divorces and changes of careers and things like that as well. And
Oh.
those two things, the out of body experience and near death experience, are kind of supportive of the idea that consciousness at least can separate from the body, and therefore part of it at least can exist on its own. And I should mention that the tunnel effect is not consistent across the world.
Mm.
I've talked to people in Japan and talked to people of other Asian extraction over the years who, one guy I talked to in Japan who kind of had the classic experience of people who were Shinto or Buddhist over there was that when he had his near death experience, there was no tunnel. He found himself on one side of a bridge, which went over not a big river, but a big stream, you might say. And on the other side, one of his ancestors' spirits was waiting for him in a
Mhm.
garden. Nice sunny
Mhm.
day. So you didn't have the dark tunneling effect at all.
Mhm.
And similar
You
things have been reported in other places too.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Do you
Yeah.
think that the difference in maybe some people seeing the tunnel and not seeing the tunnel is based on religious or personal experiences that we have in our real life, and that's somehow weaved in or a reflection of the way we perceive things?
It might be that. Certainly, the religious figures that people see being connected to their own religions or their upbringing, their culture, makes perfect sense. I mean, there was a comparison for a long time ago of a group of people who had NDEs who were Hindu in India and Christians in the U.S. And the Hindus saw various Hindu gods. They didn't all see the same, and there's thousands of Hindu gods.
Mhm.
The Christians saw, depending on their denomination, they saw supposedly Jesus, they saw a saint or some other religious figure. I kid that if it was a Jewish person, they'd probably see their grandmother with chicken soup waiting for them, something like that. So that would probably be for me, something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
it may be a very cultural thing. There also are, the psychology of people in different parts of the world, and even neural pathways may be different.
Mm.
So it may be related to that as well,
Oh,
based on culture, ecology, upbringing, all of those things. So it may
mhm.
not be as simple as just culture or religion.
Yeah. It sounds like so there's been some scientific validation that these things are happening. There's been something, yes, that
There's been
says these
significant studies on near-death experiences since the 1970s, um, including many, many medical doctors who have gotten involved over the years. I mean, there were a couple of books by cardiac surgeons. There, Eben Alexander, who was a
Mm.
neurosurgeon, had his own experience while in deep coma. There have been a number of folks who have not only had experiences but have been studying the commonalities and common features of these and looking at alternative explanations. And again, there's various components of a classic near-death experience. I think there's 15 of them, and if they have most of them, it might count as a real near-death experience. But one
Mm.
or two, having an out-of-body experience, maybe, maybe not. That may not be the classic NDE, but it could be a true and out-of-body experience. Um, it just really depends on the individual and the experience. But those who have the experience genuinely, there is a shift in a number of things that happen to them.
Mhm.
The way they look at the world, and that's one of the main qualifications for it being a true NDE.
Oh, fascinating.
I have a quick question. So, do you find, for instance, I've had several interesting experiences. One I would classify as an OBE. I've definitely had an NDE. And I've had some other, psychic dreaming and those type of
Mhm.
things. And I'm curious, is there a type of person that just has these things happen more often, or what's going on?
Well, first having an NDE means you had to have an accident or something that affected your physical body. So
Yes.
I'd say that there isn't a certain type of person that had that.
No.
Um,
No.
you know,
But it seems like you do hear of people that have had multiple NDEs, and you wonder, what are these people doing?
well, I mean, first of all, they may be predisposed to being open to the kind of experience. That's the one thing we know about psychic abilities and general
Ah,
psychic experiences is that most of us, especially in Western society, tend to second guess, write off, or ignore experiences that we have unless they're hugely impactful. And even then, people will have, they'll have a dream comes true, they'll say, oh, it's just coincidence. They'll just write it off without thinking about that. Maybe it was a form of precognition with something really happening that you picked
Mm,
up on from the future. So it really depends on the individual. And what we know is that there are some psychological components, but it really boils down to a few things. One of which is the person who is going to have more psychic experiences. I'm not talking about psychics per se,
mhm,
are people who are not going to write off those experiences. People who are
mm,
going to consider that experience, maybe not label it as psychic per se, but they're going to take note of those experiences. And we all have psychic abilities. We're all picking up things psychically. We're all scanning the environment. Um, I've worked with several psychics over the years. One of whom, when I worked with, he was a research subject for out of body experiences, but he also worked with police and other law enforcement in the New York City area. And his comment was, the first step to becoming psychic is noticing that you already are and that you're already having those experiences.
yeah.
Once you start doing that, it's like trying to learn to hear better or to focus on a particular sense better. You can do that with practice.
Yeah.
You can increase the sensitivity and perception of a single sense if you spend time with it. And it's the same thing with psychic ability. But not everybody's going to do that. Um, we have noted in many studies that people who tend to be more extroverted or who are extroverted in certain situations, because not everybody's extroverted all the time, thankfully, there are some people I think might be like that. Not everybody's introverted all the time, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So in with extroversion, you kind of go with the flow and let things happen or kind of make things happen, and that's been an indication of that. Whereas people who are introverted may be more introspective about that experience and think about, okay, this could have been coincidence. There's got to be another explanation for that, without actually talking through it, even with themselves, so
Yeah.
much.
mm,
Belief factors are very important. Not only in psychic performance, but also generally in human performance. If you don't believe you can do something, you're going to be your own worst enemy.
That's true.
mhm,
Doubt is the biggest, defeater of almost any task you try.
Yeah.
So that's pretty clear to be the case with psychic experience as well.
Oh, makes a lot of sense. What about reincarnation? This is one of my favorite subjects.
Reincarnation is believed in one form or another by over 1.5 billion people on the planet. It is not like just a new age belief, as so many skeptics like to say,
Right.
or a religious belief. There's cultures there. It's all over the place. The pioneer in our field was a man named Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. And when he passed away, his work was carried on by Jim B. Tucker. And now there are others at the University of Virginia in the Division of Perceptual Studies. Stevenson started his work in 1960 when some cases were presented to him of these little children who were talking about having been someone before. And Stevenson took a dive into these cases, which originally were from Southeast Asia for the most part, and ended up having investigators, and he did some of the field work himself, eliminating any possible contamination for these kids who were anywhere between 2 and 4 years old, who were providing sometimes incredibly detailed information that they could not have known, especially in Southeast Asia. No internet, no phones, no communication from village to village
Oh, God.
extensively. So looking at those kinds of cases has been the benchmark for our field, partly because, as Stevenson pointed out originally, adults have too much stuff in their heads.
Mm-hmm.
We've been exposed, especially these days, we've been exposed to way too much information from entertainment, pop culture, education, all of that. So it becomes very difficult when someone says, I think I may have had a past life as so and so. First of all, the stereotype is always somebody's always going to pick a famous person, and not everybody could have been Napoleon. Let's face it, just like not everybody in a mental institution could have been Napoleon either, which was kind of the stereotype 100 years ago. But
Mm-hmm.
we look at what information at the cases that, especially with kids, and there fortunately have been a lot of cases in the U.S. and Canada, and a lot more people getting involved in this process, including anthropologists. Children who not only talk about having been someone else, but you have these cases where these kids can provide extensive information, sometimes leading to an easy identification of who that person was and patterns that have emerged as well, with folks. Um, so it seems that the pattern with kids who remember previous lives, anywhere between 2 and 4 years old for the most part, and then they tend to forget and start asserting the new personality by about age 6, although there are exceptions to those cases if they're in a culture that encourages those recollections and interactions that happen.
Mm-hmm.
There are some good cases with adults with spontaneous recall where it's very clear they could not have known this, but then there's a question of ESP maybe coming in for some of this, um, which is a hard alternative explanation for a lot of the good stuff with kids, especially with kids. But the cases continue to be investigated these days. We have what are called solved cases where we can identify the previous personality and the process, that there's no information contamination. And then we have the unsolved cases where some of these kids say, I used in my last mother or my last father, I used to live so and so, but they don't have enough information. The researchers can't get enough information to identify who that person was
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
So
How,
and we're not even sure what gets reincarnated. So honestly, we don't know what gets reincarnated.
when you mentioned ESP involved, how can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So within the field of parapsychology, there are true materialists in our field. Okay, who even with the reincarnation with these little kids do not accept that anything could have been reborn per se, whether it's spirit, consciousness, whatever else, even memory in some way. So they explain everything by often what's called super ESP, or we just call ESP, that for some reason the kid is able to pick up information about this one person who used to live, enough information to kind of channel that through, put that out there. The problem is that these kids are not psychic otherwise. There's no other indication that they have psychic abilities, which is actually not the case with a lot of kids, because little kids tend to be more psychic than adults.
Yeah.
And when they lose the memories, they don't grow up to be psychics, with the rarest exception. So most of us who look at survival evidence, we don't accept that. That's like you're basically using something which, by the way, a lot of scientists don't even accept, ESP, as being omnipresent and omnipotent in some respects. It's omniscient enough to pick so much information about this one previous person with no connection to the current kid or family. Is that a random selection? And if that's random, why that person? Why does it disappear? Why doesn't the kid have any other psychic ability? I mean, there's so many reasons why that can't be the case. With adults, it's a little tougher unless they really have a good data dump of information.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, what you say makes a lot of sense. It seems a little far fetched, right? That ESP is involved.
It's really kind of funny. I will say that one of my colleagues, Ed May, who was the Stargate remote viewing program director for the government for many years, his background's physics, and he's a materialist who doesn't believe in survival. doesn't see that there is something separable from consciousness. But he knows that consciousness can pick up information, all that. But he still looks at these kid cases and says, yeah, ESP doesn't explain that. There's just
Yeah.
really not a good explanation. So
Yeah.
he's I don't know what it is, but
I don't know
even
what it
Carl,
is.
even Carl
I love
Sagan,
it.
who was a staunch disbeliever in anything psychic, said that that was one of a couple of things in parapsychology that was deserving of significant research. Not that the rest of the skeptics ever paid attention to that.
Yeah. Gosh. It should be researched more. It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah.
You would think that first of all, you'd think that psychologists would want to research this. You would think that information scientists should be interested in this subject. Neuroscientists should be interested in it. I mean, there should be significant interest in these kids,
Yeah.
and you know, it's because it smacks of reincarnation, and that's woo woo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
have an interesting story about kind of this past life reincarnation thing. And it actually ties in with my NDE, and I actually haven't shared this before. So here it goes. So following my NDE, so I had my NDE. I was in the ICU for some time because I had lost half my blood volume.
Mm,
And so they tried keeping me stable. But during this time while I was in the ICU, um, I had 2 past life remembrances. And I chalked it up as, well, maybe it was just a dream. Maybe it was, but it was
hmm
so real. And it was so, the smells, the feeling, everything about it was real. I was just transported into these 2 experiences, and they were brief, but they were as real as I am sitting here today.
hmm
And, and so that's always fascinated me. Like, again, I've never shared it before. Um, but I've always wanted to kind of try and make sense of it. I have done past life regression journeys, into these lives and learned the stories of them. However,
hmm
I still never really fully understood it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've not heard of anybody who had those kinds of experiences. I haven't really taken a deep dive into all the literature in the NDE world. I mean, that's an interesting thing in itself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the past life regression thing for us is difficult, although you have a spontaneous experience, which I think gives it a little bit more credence in many respects. And the reason it's difficult is because, as you know, hypnosis is some cooperative, right? So telling somebody to go back before their birth, they're going to have a story. A colleague of mine, Kerry Gaynor, who actually makes his living with hypnosis, he's a hypnotherapist. And Kerry also, for many, many years, was doing past life regressions, but he is a parapsychologist. So
Oh.
he would ask people in their past life some important questions. So the person's, I was a farmer in south of France in the 14th century. All right, gives us some detail. Give Kerry some detail. Kerry would then say, "What'd you eat for breakfast? What was a typical day like? Where'd you poop?"
Yeah.
Very, very mundane detail questions, which any human being could normally. Maybe you don't remember what you had for breakfast today, but you normally know what you had for breakfast, right? So occasionally he would get answers. Most of the time, he said that a lot of them sounded like they saw a movie in their
Mm-hmm.
youth, right? We used to kid each other that if we were regressed, we would probably be pirates, but it would all sound like, Pirates of the Caribbean or one of the movies from the 40s or 50s.
Mm-hmm.
He would go to the library at UCLA. He would look up 14th century South France, the everyday life of people in that area in the history records, and sometimes find that, yeah, unless this person was a history buff or had studied history of that time period and looked into all that, they're remembering stuff that they could not possibly have known.
Mhm.
And that supports that this may have been a genuine past life. But it was
Mm-hmm.
so frequent or so infrequent, I should say. At one point he said, maybe 1 in 500 of the regressions he did.
Mm-hmm.
Starting out with an experience like you had, with the right questions being asked, might have gotten the same answers, same kind of answers from the mundane stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
always a good thing to start asking if you are conducting regressions is asking those kind of
Yeah.
stupid, mundane questions that most people would never ever think about at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My grandfather, I'm a past life regressionist, but my grandfather was also a past life regressionist, and he was a scientist. He was also a psychologist, and he got into this thinking that he was going to debunk it, that it was
Hmm.
all, he called it baloney. And he actually researched and found validating facts from some of his
That's what
clients.
has to be done. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what has to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a past life regressionist, I've also done that kind of just for fun. Like,
Yeah.
is there something validating here? And I encourage my clients too to, like look to see if you can find some evidence. Um, and that we're not just making this up.
And all of that is important to say that past life regression therapy, how powerful that is for
Yeah.
people. So when people ask, I'm going to have a past life regression, and I said, well, you're going to get a lot out of it, regardless of whether that past life is real. You're going to get a
Yeah.
lot out of that
Mhm.
session, and
Yeah.
that's what you want to. That's the mindset you need to go into for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. I would love if we kind of segue now into we have so much information to share today. Some of your work with the Forever Family Foundation
Hmm.
and the importance of the mediums supporting the grieving process for the family. And there's a different kinds of mediums and how we know they're really supporting the client and how do we know if they're accurate?
So first, I should say that the foundation was founded by a couple, Bob and Fran Ginsburg, who lost their teenage daughter in a car accident in the early 2000s, and they were in deep grief over this. Their son also was in the car and got
Mhm.
severely injured. He's fine these days, but um, one of their neighbors was seeing a medium by the name of Janet Mayer, and for whatever reason, the neighbor contacted them because Bob and Fran's daughter Bailey came through to to
Mhm.
give a message to her parents, and it was very specific. And Bob was a major skeptic back then, didn't believe in any of this stuff. So Fran took that, said it felt really real to her. She convinced Bob that they should meet with Janet. They had several sessions. Bob slowly but surely could not come up with any other explanation for the kind of information that he was getting
Wow.
for that. And then just looked into the science of that, studies of the mediums and such. And really, what they learned also was they were having relief from grief.
Mm.
In this process, the grieving process was accelerated, ameliorated. I mean, it was all that. And then Janet connected them with, I think, one or two other couples that had lost kids that she was seeing. And eventually it grew to a group that decided they would start a nonprofit organization and take the right tack. They contacted many scientists in the field of parapsychology and kind of in psychology as well. They had a couple of advisory boards. They started this organization with the intention of, with the help of a couple of researchers, of setting up a testing process, a protocol, which continues to this day. It's all done
Mm.
virtually these days. Back then, it was only done a couple times a year in New York. And the thing that they were looking for is what we call an evidential medium. So some mediums will come up with information that just is very, very general,
Mm.
and it can still be helpful. Of course, there are frauds as well. And there are
Yes.
Mhm.
different kinds of frauds, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The ones who are really taking advantage and want to see the grieving people every week or something like that. And then there are the frauds that just simply, they're not frauds per se, but they are more in the entertainment world. I can kind of say that there's a lot of
Yeah.
psychic readers who are not really psychic. Some of them are much better at reading people than some psychics are when
Mhm.
it comes down to it.
Yeah.
But the other piece of what they want to do with the testing is to make sure these mediums had clean backgrounds and ethics that and basically were geared towards helping people through the grieving process. And that was a key element. Involved grief counselors coming in as well. Grief psychologists got involved. So it's not an easy process, the certification. In fact, I have a medium I work with who was one of my students here in the Bay Area at HCH, in fact, years ago.
Oh.
She was here yesterday, and we were talking. She's finally at a point where she feels like she's going to try the testing.
Oh.
But she's filling out all the paperwork. She said, "This is going to take me hours to do all this." It's not an easy process.
No.
It also involves interviews with somebody from the foundation, plus one of our mediums, all of that, and then they have to do the testing. And the stats are about only 10% pass.
Wow.
So it is a rigorous process. We look for people who are providing a couple of things. One is factual information, including the little things that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What was your father's favorite food? Or um, tell me some, their personal things about people, saying, ways people would say something, way they would walk, descriptive things that you probably would not find on YouTube or Facebook unless that individual was these days heavily involved in social media. So it's really the evidence that comes through that we're really looking for, plus the way the mediums work with people as well. I've seen several of the gallery readings and had individual readings with some of these folks. Most of our mediums, I'd say that with only one or two exceptions, they have been so interested in research on mediumship that many of them have volunteered to be guinea pigs, more or less, in some of the brain research that's being done with mediumship as well. They want to know how and why their abilities are working. And I don't see this with a lot of psychics, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
Mediums are a class all themselves, mostly because they have curiosity. And I tend to think it's because they're social. I mean, they're talking to people whether they're living or dead, so they have to be social, right? So there's that element there.
Mm-hmm.
But we have been running, the foundation's been running grief retreats for many years. We usually do 3 or 4 a year, and 3 on the East Coast. We've done 1 on the West Coast. This year, we're not doing 1 on the West Coast. We are doing a psychic and mediumship development conference down in Burbank, California, in October, in beautiful downtown Burbank. So where some of the mediums will be doing classes, but also doing readings, and I'll be doing a bunch of stuff down there as well. Our
Cool.
keynote is Laura Lynn Jackson, who's a very, very well-known medium, who's a
Yes.
sweetheart. She's also on our board for the Rhine Research Center.
Oh, she's
And
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and I would say that the majority of mediums, they all have other interests. They're not just mediums. This is something I've learned working with psychics and mediums over the years. The best psychics and mediums have other interests. Their whole world is not the psychic or spirit world. So
Mm.
it's always interesting. And Laura came from being a teacher, school teacher.
Yeah. She's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Other than seeking out your the Forever Family Foundation, if somebody was looking for a medium,
Mhm.
what are a couple of tips that you would give for things that people should look for or be asking?
Well, there are, I teach a whole class in this subject actually for psychics and mediums. So
Yeah.
one thing is, what are their claims? And here are 2 kind of red flags. One, the medium says, if I said, can you contact my Uncle Herb? No problem. I can contact anybody you want. Not true. It is a two-way communication. So if my Uncle Herb, who is dead, decided he didn't want to talk to Lloyd today, you're going to talk to Aunt Roz instead. He's not going to come through.
Yeah.
It's not dial a spirit. So that's one red flag. And the better mediums will start out by saying, I may not contact who you want me to contact.
Mhm.
You have to mentally tell them to come through. They still may not come through.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, some of the bad reviews of our mediums have been, well, the medium did contact my father, but I didn't want to talk to my father. I wanted to talk to my mother. So I'm giving them bad marks.
Oh.
But that's, again, a red flag. The other red flag, which is a red flag for any psychic at all, is when they claim success, 95% success, 90 with psychics, my predictions are 98% correct. First thing I say to them is, how do you calculate that? Because even with mediumship, if they're successful to contact a spirit 95% of the time, well, they're mediums. They should be able to do that. But does that count for the spirit the person wanted to talk to? And this is back to that first red flag.
Right.
So you got to ask questions about that. And then another question I would ask, another red flag is, how often do your clients come to see you? And I do not want to hear from a medium once a month, once a week, once, I mean,
Yeah.
even a good psychic will say, yeah, come back in 6 months,
Yeah.
come back in a year.
Yeah.
If you are dealing with grief and you're talking to a medium and the medium says, seems to contact that relative, and for whatever reason, you're not feeling any sort of relief from that, and you decide you're going to see the same medium or another medium as soon as possible. I've seen people who've come to some of our grief retreats who they seriously need therapy. It's not about mediumship, because even if they hear what they wanted to hear from whatever relative, deceased person, kid, whatever, it's not enough, because they can't, for whatever reason, think they feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so there are people who take advantage of that
Yeah.
and will put you on a hook.
Yeah.
And sadly, I occasionally see some of our mediums telling the people, like, you really need to see, here's a grief therapist you should go to. Before you come back to me or go to any other medium, please go for counseling before
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
Healing is a process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about grief is it's not Kubler-Ross's five stages. And or even the same, maybe it's 5 stages, but not necessarily in the order that she had written down.
Right.
And even
Yeah.
she said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of the processes are repeated and repeated until it's finally healed. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And you have to, people talk about, in the mediumship world, in the spiritual community, will talk about letting go of the person. Even when I've done investigations on occasion, and it's a relative who's or somebody who's used to be in the house or something connected to that family, it is about, we hear about unfinished business as a reason why ghosts stick around. That's this much. But it's usually the unfinished business is the unfinished business of the living, not the
Yeah.
dead. It's like, you got to let them go. You got to deal with your grief. I'm here to make sure you're okay. You're not okay. Yeah.
That stands for pets as well as our human family.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I know that you have some really good ghost stories. Since
Hmm.
we're talking about the ones on the other side, it seems natural to go into this subject now, and I'm really looking forward to this. Can you share some of your favorite stories with us?
I'm going to try to make them relatively short, because I could spend, 15 minutes on a single one.
Yeah.
Um, so one, which was kind of transformative for me, because I really was at a place where there's good evidence for apparitions, but there are other psychic possible explanations. We had a case back in very early '85 of a family in Livermore, California. And the mother just discovered that her 12-and-a-half-year-old son had been talking to the ghost that the rest of the family had been individually seeing, but not talking to each other about. He made some comments and said something to her that about some of the antiques that they had gotten. They bought this house in an estate sale. The woman who had been born in this house, lived in the house her entire life, died in the hospital. One living relative who was older than her and was in assisted living. And so the house was in an estate sale. They got the house, they got antique furniture and some other stuff, because the woman had really great taste. So the kid starts talking about this one porcelain doll collection that's in a collector's cabinet. His mom's like, "So where'd you find this information at? We've been looking for paperwork all over the house." "Oh, Lois told me." "Who's Lois?" "The ghost, mom, that you, dad, and grandma are seeing but aren't talking about." The mother was an attorney, started interrogating her son, and came to find out that they had all. Then they started talking to each other. They had all, within the first week or two of the move, the grandmother, the mother's mother, was coming in and helping, and would visit every once in a while. Would see this older woman occasionally just in the living room, sometimes walking through the living room, sometimes walking to the stairs, and she'd turn and wave at them and then disappear. And the first time that happened, the boy waved back, and the ghost did not disappear. In fact, they started talking, and they were talking almost every day. And she was helping him with his homework, and his grades got better. And yeah. Although he did comment to me that she wouldn't come to school and help him cheat on the test, but that was a whole different story. Um, we ended up, three of us drove down from JFK University in Orinda, California to Livermore, about 40 minutes. I had a relatively old car. We were having a conversation in the car. One of the students was a transpersonal counseling student. Getting to know him, he had been out of school for many years and coming back to school, and he had been a professional dancer in television in Hollywood, in LA. The other was my wife at the time, Joanna, who was just about to quit her job as a legal a secretary working in a law firm, and we are talking about the car. So we get to the house, start recording, interview everybody. The husband was out of town at the time. The grandmother was there as well. And we got family stories and stories about the city of Livermore. I excluded from any evidence the stories about Livermore early days because that could have been something he read. I was able to track down and contact the only living relative who can not only confirm the family stories, but I would start when he would finish it. They were all stories that he was aware of as a cousin, which was impressive to detail that was there. The kid would have found and memorized diaries for many years, which was not something the woman had found looking through the house. Then we have a sit down with the ghost in an empty chair and started asking her questions. And, eventually it ended up saying, any questions for us? And after a couple of funny questions about Ghostbusters, because that was about the time the movie came out, which I suspect came from the kid and not from the ghost. I asked her why she was around. What happened when she died? What does she remember? She remembered closing her eyes after doing a life review, thinking, I don't know if I'm going to heaven or hell. Not that I was a bad person, but I wasn't religious, so I just want to go home. Closed her eyes. Next thing she knew, she was in the living room. Waited for the new family to come in, like them, stayed around. The kid would occasionally see her in different clothing, at different ages, because she said, that's how I think of myself. So that's the projection. That's how I'm connecting with people. And that's something we knew in parapsychology was the most likely explanation for why ghosts look younger than they did when they died and why they have clothing on at all. Something he would not have been able to find out about very easily. And then, Lloyd, what kind of new car do you want to get? Joanna, do you really want to quit your job? And Kip, how long were you a professional dancer? One after the other.
Wow.
There is no way, unless they bugged my car, that this kid could have known that.
Wow.
So, and given that there was no motivation for like a movie or something like that, and I followed up for many years, this was a genuine case of a friendly ghost, but she had not moved to the other side. The thing about apparitions, or what people call ghosts, is they're still in the physical world. They're consciousness without a body, but they're still in the physical world. Another case I had, which is a place called the Banta Inn out in Tracy, California. It's a fun case. In fact, I haven't been back there in several years. I'm going to be going with the medium I mentioned earlier, probably next month, just to have lunch and see if there's any activity at all. But I was there in the 1980s, and they had activity since 1968 when Tony Gukin, who was the bartender, he and his wife had owned the place at the time. He was bartender, owner, manager, and kind of a local celebrity in many respects, kind of taking care of everybody. And after he died of a massive heart attack, he was seen in the bar by a number of the regulars for a couple of weeks. And of course, nobody paid attention to the regulars because they were regulars and drinking a lot. But then people would come through the bar area to go to the restaurant and remark about this guy sitting in the corner, and some specific things about him that just matched Tony. So other locals started seeing him. When Joan Borland, who was the owner from the early 70s till about the mid 90s, she and her husband bought the place. She had grown up in the area. She had known Tony. She saw him a couple of times. There was physical activity that started in the 70s, and it continued through the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s when I was there, where Tony was playing with people and would do things like changing the song on the CD jukebox, flipping the CDs, having glasses fly off the bar, dropping down to the ground, but not breaking. Witnessed, by the way, by a physicist who we talked to from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, who basically had seen, as he put it, the show. He and his buddies from the physics department would come to see the show. His stuff
Oh,
would start moving around for him. And stuff moved around when I was there. We had some really funny interactions with him. With that, I had a few psychics who came in and communicated with him, including one from Japan who claimed that he was flirting with her. But the best thing was that Joan's husband was a Alameda County sheriff's deputy, and he didn't buy into the ghost thing. But enough people who did not know the area, didn't know the area, didn't know the story, claimed to see this guy. So he put together a bunch of photos of this picture of Tony. There are pictures of Tony's friends, a group shot. Somebody came in and they saw it, said, "Who's that guy in the corner?" or said something. He would pull out the photos. Every time, he said, people immediately picked out Tony from the group,
wow.
as did the Japanese medium when she was talking to him. And he said, that may not hold up in court, but that's a mug book. And then he had his own experience in the kitchen, which was minimal. By activity's sake, he was helping in the kitchen, cleaning up, just washing dishes. And a spoon apparently lifted up out of the rinse water, like floated up in front of his eyes, and then shot off across the room.
Wow.
And Joan mentioned that he came out and looked very dejected and said, "Yeah, okay, I believe you now," and then walked back into the kitchen. But there were all sorts of really fun stories. Apparently, Tony chased out some Hell's Angels from the place, freaked them out in some way that nobody really knows how that happened. I was sitting at a table with a director and his fiance and a cameraman when shooting a segment for one of the TV shows. And it's hard to capture stuff on camera. Most of it happens behind the camera. But we're sitting having dinner, and a salt shaker starts moving across the table back and forth like an old Abbott and Costello routine.
Wow.
So, and there were some other very funny things that happened for many, many years. And Joan said when people were teasing her, if she was behind the bar, there were two guys who were incessantly teasing. He'd heard about the ghost, and "Oh yeah, we don't believe in this. This is all BS. You're making it up." Apparently, they each had a beer in front of them. They had change of their 20s in front of them. And Joan said a quarter in front of each of them flipped up on edge.
Wow.
And they looked at it, and they looked at her, and they ran out of the place.
It probably
Gotta be
never
typical.
came back.
Yeah. Doesn't take much.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much at all. Yeah.
Wow. I love your stories. Oh my God. Your paranormal case book, are these stories in there or talk
So
about
so the
those?
Banta Inn, the Banta Inn and many others are definitely in that book. There's even a few case stories that cases I've had which had actually normal but very unusual explanations. So you can find some other interesting stories. But the Banta Inn's definitely in there. The case of Lois, the lengthy write-up is actually in a book by Leslie Kean, Kean, called Surviving Death.
Mm.
I wrote a whole chapter for that book, and there's a very extensive write-up of that case that's in there. And I'll probably put a version of it in my next volume of the case book, which hope to get done by this fall.
I just have a quick question. So I've heard you mention before that the state of consciousness after departing the body, and that we go to the other place, right? It's
Whatever
another
that means.
place,
Yeah.
but is it
Yeah.
another place? Like,
Uh,
what happens with the conscious?
Yeah. I mean, this is a hard concept for us because we don't know, is it another dimension in physics? Is it just a different way that we look at the world? I mean, we don't really know what that afterlife is like. It actually is. The only thing we have really is what mediums tell us when they have spirits projecting back. They're not actually coming to you. They're projecting from whatever that other state is. And the biggest problem with that is that any concepts are filtered through the brain mind of the medium, the concepts. So, in science fiction, you can also talk about trying to imagine something that's more difficult, or write a story about something that is next to impossible to describe because it's more different than our imagination will let us describe.
Mm.
So if you're in a universe or existence without physical form, how can you describe that? I mean, how can that be described in normal terms, right? Um,
Right.
so it has to be described in terms that we can understand. What we do know is a couple of things that seem to be common to most mediums, and this just may be human filtering, that there is no hell. Heaven, is a religious concept in that sense, but the
Mhm.
idea of the afterlife is that first, when you die, you have a life. I mean, you go through your life and you have to confront every good and bad thing you did.
Mhm.
So for some people, that would be hell, I'm sure.
Yes.
Um, but you can communicate with others who have passed away. There's other humans or dead humans that are there. Time is a little different. It's not time passing the way we think it passes in that linear form. So there have been cases where someone's come back as a spirit at the same time that supposedly they're reincarnated in a physical body. And that's again
Mm.
because time doesn't match in
Yeah.
that respect.
Yeah.
I mean, even our concepts of time in science, when science looks at time, there are many books, physics and philosophy,
Yeah.
about what time is, and they don't agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot we don't know. I will recommend a book that there was a science fiction writer named Philip Jose Farmer who wrote a great book, which is called Traitor to the Living. I don't even know if it's in print still. I think it is. Traitor to the Living. And part of it starts out because someone contacts the other side and starts bringing people back to kind of possess living people, like giving them a second chance. But the description of the other side is as an electromagnetic body universe, EMBU. Like it's a different plane of existence. Everybody's an energy form, all of that, and
Mhm.
they can communicate and connect. He does an interesting description of that, of what that's like. Again, as a science fiction writer trying to describe that.
Wow. Wow.
So you can find stuff in science fiction that you can't find anywhere else, I think. But is it real? I guess we'll find out when we get there.
That's
I'm not in a
Yeah.
hurry.
I'm just curious because of my own personal experience in that.
The whole idea of that afterlife or going through the tunnel with the near death experience, we hear people. I just saw another article, I haven't read it yet, that someone describes is just going to describe the afterlife. But it's different.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily the same because it's still being filtered through our experience.
Right.
Mhm.
And
That's right.
that's the difficulty, is trying to translate that experience into language. That's been the most difficult thing, to try and come
Right.
up with words for an ineffable experience.
It's hard to draw an image that,
Yeah.
because you're
Oh,
confronted by something that doesn't suit your or fit your perceptual abilities and
yeah.
memories, and you have no connection to it. It's really hard to describe.
That's why that's why books on it take so long to write.
Yeah.
For sure.
Long
And that's why
process.
people make up words too, I think. Sometimes, or look for words from ancient languages that don't really do justice to what's going on.
Sitting
Mhm.
at your computer, staring. 5
Right.
minutes, what's the word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Oh
interesting.
gosh. I feel like I have so many questions. Your professional opinion, with the age of internet and all of the sharing of information now, there's so much information out there. So I'm wondering,
Mm.
in your experience of your research and what you've seen, do you think it's possible that people are becoming more intuitive? Would that be the sharing of information and the access to information, or are we becoming more open-minded because of that, or is there something else going on?
Well, definitely, there's been more interest because there's been more discussion of the question,
Um,
as David Chalmers called the hard question of science, which is what is consciousness?
Mm,
So we're seeing a lot more spreading of ideas that way. Sadly, we're also seeing a spread of really bad ideas too
yeah, too.
in science and society, all of that. I mean, there's good and there's bad. Um, I don't think people are becoming more psychic because they have access to that information. In fact, I think it tends to be less. Because
yeah.
why would you try to be psychic picking up information if you can just simply ask an AI
Yeah.
or ask Google, right? Go to your phone and ask that question. Now,
Yeah.
how many of us don't remember phone numbers anymore because we don't need to, right? They're in our phones.
Mhm.
So there is that piece of it where that too much information and having access to too much information, I don't want to say makes us lazy, but we are bombarded with stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's really a matter of looking at the question, but the question of consciousness is definitely a bigger question now, and people from other fields of science, and there's a lot of disagreement within different fields of science, different disciplines about that question, because it depends on the philosophy somebody's coming from. But it's
Mhm.
really expanded and exploded in a way that um, I think is because of the internet, because of the web,
Mhm.
and we're seeing more people coming to us than we ever have from other fields, coming to parapsychologists or discovering that parapsychologists have been doing stuff in this area for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are surprised. I know that working with the ghost hunting world, the clubs and organizations, the groups that have started because of the TV shows,
Mhm.
are often surprised. I've had people come to me over the years. So, what do you think about this idea I just came up with? Yeah, that's the 1880s. That was Frederick Myers.
Not new.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just like,
Mm.
I'm glad you came to that on your own, but let's try to take it and go further by going back and seeing what's been done already. And we are seeing a bit of that happening, at least for our
Yeah.
field, with our field
I'm
as
glad
well.
people are becoming more interested. I think, yeah, there's a good point there that, yeah, with the
Yeah,
conversation.
but the internet, people are more interested in or talking about they're interested in the paranormal, for example, on ghosts and things like that. But there's so much bad information because people, for whatever reason, have believed reality TV is real,
Yeah.
and it's definitely not.
Yeah, that is a bit problematic, isn't it?
Mm.
Hmm.
Would you like to share some information about the Rhine Research Center and the classes that you teach? I looked this up and there is so much good stuff in there.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. I want to take some classes.
Good,
Talk
that's
to me
good.
about what you teach there. Yeah.
I wanted to take all of them. I went through the list. I'm like, "Oh, and that, and that."
Yeah.
Well, over the next couple of years, we'll offer all of them. Um, so the Rhine Research Center itself is in its 90th year, coming up on our 91st. It is the legacy organization of the original Duke University Parapsychology Laboratory, started by the Rhines and William McDougall back in 1935. And after the Rhines retired from Duke, they started a foundation, which eventually morphed into what we are today, which is the Rhine Research Center after they passed away. We renamed it. Um, it is a research organization and an educational organization. At the moment, we are without a physical home. We're in the process of looking for a building to buy or some space to buy. We've been leasing for a long time, and then our lease got pulled because the owners sold the building out from under us, which is
Mm.
always exciting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, before the end of this year, we'll have some new space. We're looking for bigger space anyway, in the Durham, North Carolina area. We had a lab, and we will have a lab going forward because we do have research going on. Research has included some on out of body. We've been doing. John Kruth has been doing research on biophoton emission.
Mm.
That's energy being given off by human beings, verified by physical science, mind you, um,
Mhm.
in a lab, and finding that certain healers, and even certain martial artists are able to amp it up significantly. So that's part of the process the part of what the research is going on there.
Mm.
But we have the whole education arm, which kind of spills over a little bit into the research center itself. We do webinars, which are available for free, hopefully for donation. People can find out the upcoming webinars that are going on. And then we have our classes through the Rhine Education Center. And we offer several different certificate programs, whether they are kind of a liberal studies. We have a couple different ones for researchers, people want to do laboratory research, others who want to be field investigators, field researchers. And the courses run a wide range. John Kruth and I are the two main instructors. Currently, this is May of 2026. I just started teaching a course on parapsychology and anthropology, kind of looking cross culturally at psychic beliefs and experiences. I'm teaching a course on the evidence for survival, a deep dive into survival of bodily death, and a 4-week class on, kind of a practical guide to psychics and mediums, some of the stuff we talked about here tonight.
Mm.
John has been teaching research courses. Right now, he's teaching a course on 8 important studies in parapsychology, which does include some of the field work. And we have another individual, Jimmy Aiken, who's been teaching our intro to parapsychology, kind of an overview class for a while. We have a course on out-of-body experiences. Paul Smith teaches one on remote viewing once in a while. We're gonna have an upcoming class on reincarnation as well. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of classes that we do offer, either 8-week or 4-week, and people take them for credit towards a certificate, so for a grade, or they take them for fun. They take them because of interest, and they're all online. We've had students all over the world. They're all recorded. The recordings are up the next day. People can attend live, or they can actually just watch the recording, still communicate in the forums with me, with what the other instructors, with the other students. But it's always fun to have, because we have a discussion period after each lecture for
Mhm.
people to chat. So it's been going since 2014 at this point,
Wow.
and we have a lot of people who come through, which is great for the organization
Absolutely.
and great for people. It's one of the only places to kind of get a decent education in the U.S. at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I love those offerings. I think that's great.
The Rhine Research Center's video library, which is open to everybody right now, not just to members, over 100 really great lectures from across time. So
Wow.
that are there.
Great resource.
Oh, yeah. I'm checking those out for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything I missed as far as like what you do and what you offer?
Well, I mean, I have other books besides the paranormal case book.
Mhm.
So people can explore those on my website, which is just lloydauerbach.com. Um, and I occasionally do, besides podcasts like this, because I'm doing usually a few a month, I occasionally
Mhm.
do online lectures too for various organizations. Those are also listed on the media page on my
Mhm.
website as
Mhm.
well. I mean, the only other thing I do, you mentioned I do psychic entertainment. So yeah, I do perform. I'm actually known as Professor Paranormal both in parapsychology and not, and also doing psychic entertainment. So I do perform every so often. It's been quiet for me. I'm going to be hopefully ramping up to perform more this fall.
Mhm.
It's mind reading stuff, but it's fun. It's entertainment. It's not real in that
What
sense.
kind of places do you perform at?
Yeah.
Well, generally it's private parties or corporate business parties. I've done a lot of private parties for people, birthdays, anniversaries. I don't do kid parties, but I have done stuff for teenagers. Yeah, I've done big kid parties. Yeah, I've done parties, just done like grad nights for high
Oh,
school
yeah.
students and
Mhm.
college students, stuff like that. But I've done a lot, done a few corporate events, and then on occasion I will um, have someone help me. We'll get a space and put on a show, so to speak, for that.
Mhm.
I will be performing. Actually, one of the things I'll be doing at the Forever Family Foundation's event, I'll be doing a show performance there as well. We tend to include that a bit, and I do an every other week live Q&A on YouTube as well,
I dipped
called Ask,
into one of those the other
yeah,
day.
called Ask
Yes.
Professor Paranormal.
I love it.
Yeah.
Those
Fantastic.
are great. I enjoyed it.
Wisdom that you can share with our audience for anybody that's having a paranormal experience, like where would be the first place you would point them?
So it depends on the experience, but I do have a resources page on my website, and that lists a variety of organizations and other resources. If people want to dive into what the experience, if they can identify what kind of experience it was, the place to go would be the Psi Encyclopedia. It's
Okay.
PSI Encyclopedia. It's from the Society for Psychical Research. It is in-depth articles about the field, about people in the field, about experiences. There is a lot on reincarnation there from different angles too. These are articles that are written by people within the field. They're written for the general public, so they're not written for scientists or researchers.
Yeah.
So I
Wow.
would say that that's a really good resource. But they can reach out to the Rhine Center, to me, if they need some additional information or other places to be pointed to, or even some other kinds of resources that they might have. One of the things that's important to know is that psychic experiences can be scary to people and
Mhm.
even traumatizing to some extent.
Mhm.
And there aren't a lot of psychotherapists, counselors there's very few who specialize in it.
Mhm.
Um, and there's very few, unfortunately, in the world of psychology who are open to it. which
Mhm.
is sad. But there are some, and we can sometimes point you in that direction or how to find somebody in your area if you want to do that. Fortunately or unfortunately, um, there's usually somebody within your state, but they can't do usually across state lines because of licensing issues in
Mm.
psychology. So
Okay. Mhm.
there's not enough resources nationwide, but there's enough for people to get some background information and some way to help themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So, how can our listeners find you?
So
Do
one
we have a
way is lloydauerbach.com.
okay.
That is my main website. You can also just get to me via email, and my email is profparanormal, P-R-O-F, as in Professor Paranormal, at gmail.com.
Mm.
You can contact me through the contact form on my website. If you get to the Rhine Center and say, I need to get in touch with Lloyd, they'll send it to me. If you happen to run across the Parapsychological Association, they'll just say, I need to get in touch with Lloyd. I'm the only Lloyd in the organization. They'll get to me. Or the Forever Family Foundation. Those are
Mm.
all ways they can contact me as well. So I think there may even be contact on my author page on Amazon. I can't recall if there's
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
way to do any author contact that way.
Mhm.
And we'll be sure to include that information in our
Yeah.
notes as well.
There's
So,
also Facebook. I'm on Twitter and, all those other things. All the things.
all
Yes,
the things.
all the things.
Oh,
Mm.
Lloyd, thank you so much for stepping into this space with us. It's been such a joy. I'm very grateful for the
Thank
information.
you.
Fascinating
Yeah.
conversation. Thank you.
So, for our listeners, if you feel nourished or inspired by the Veil Between Lives, please subscribe, like, share, comment, or leave a review. It helps these conversations reach the souls meant to find them.
Thank you, everyone.